By 2002, the JPEG was already invisible. Every digital photograph, every image on every website, every picture your phone saved was a JPEG, a compression standard the whole industry had built and agreed to share for free for over a decade. Then a company in Austin, Texas, that most people had never heard of made an announcement. It said it owned a patent that covered JPEG. It said that all of those billions of images had been infringing it the entire time. And it began sending invoices to the largest technology companies on Earth. The JPEG had been published as an open standard by an international committee precisely so that no single company could own it. Now one was trying anyway. The company was Forgent Networks. It did not invent JPEG. It barely had anything to do with it. But for about 4 years, it tried to collect a toll on one of the most common file formats in the world. Here is what Forgent actually held. United States Patent 4698672 coding system for reducing redundancy was filed by a company called Compression Labs in October of 1986 and granted in 1987. Read it in context, and it is a patent about a video codec. It described a way to compress moving images for teleconferencing equipment, the kind of room-sized hardware businesses used in the 1980s. It was a real piece of engineering written for a real product. Compression Labs was later folded into Forgent Networks, and Forgent acquired the patent in 1997, not to build anything, but as an asset. That is the quiet hinge of this whole case. A patent's power comes from its claims, the numbered sentences at the end that define exactly what it owns. Forgent's argument was that the mathematics in those claims, the way the patent described reducing redundancy in image data, was broad enough to reach the discrete cosine transform at the heart of JPEG. So a patent drafted for 1980s video conferencing was now being pointed at every still image on the internet. The question was not whether the patent existed. It was how far a claim written for one thing can be stretched to cover another. And there was a second question, buried deeper, that would surface later. Whether the patent should have been granted as broadly as it was in the first place. Forgent did not start with a lawsuit. It started with letters. In February of 2003 it reached a license with Sony, reported at around $15 to $16 million. And company by company the money came in. By 2004, Forgent reported earning roughly $90 million from licensing the patent to about 30 companies across Asia, Europe, and the United States. For a firm that built nothing, that was an extraordinary return on a single old patent. But the companies that paid did so for a specific reason, not because they agreed, but because fighting a patent suit costs more than settling one. That is the engine of this kind of campaign. The threat is the product, and the math almost always favors the plaintiff. A license costs a few $1 million. A patent trial costs more than that just to walk through the courthouse door, win or lose. So for 2 years, faced with a patent on a format they could not stop using, company after company quietly chose the cheaper option and paid. Then Forgent overreached. In April of 2004, it sued 31 companies at once in the Eastern District of Texas, the federal court in Marshall that had become the favorite venue for patent plaintiffs, known for moving fast and for juries friendly to the people holding the patent. The defendants were not small.
Adobe, Apple, Dell, Kodak,
Fuji, Hewlett, Packard, IBM, and this time, instead of paying, a consortium of them did the math the other way. They countersued to invalidate the patent. Microsoft filed its own action in 2005. The targets had decided the patent itself was the thing to attack, that it was cheaper, in the end, to kill the patent once than defeat it forever. 2 blows landed almost together. First, the Public Patent Foundation, a nonprofit that exists to challenge patents it considers wrongly granted, asked the United States Patent and Trademark Office to re-examine the patent. The office agreed, and in a 2006 action, it rejected the broad, independent claims of the patent. The prior art that did the damage was almost poetic, an earlier patent by another Compression Labs engineer, Andrew Tescher, describing similar work, prior art that the patent's owners had not disclosed when they filed. The invention Forgent was renting out, in other words, may not have been as new as the patent claimed. Second, the court in Texas read the patent narrowly. It construed the claims to cover video, not still JPEG images at all. That construction quietly destroyed the entire business model. If the patent covered video and not still images, then the JPEG on every website was never infringing anything. Forgent admitted as much, telling investors that its ability to win further licensing revenue was, in its own words, substantially concluded. The patent had been stretched to cover a world it was never written for, and a judge had snapped it back to its real size. The patent's 20-year term expired on the 27th of October 2006. A few weeks later, in November of 2006, Forgent agreed to abandon enforcement of the patent against the JPEG standard and to settle out its remaining cases. The toll booth closed, but notice what Forgent walked away with. The campaign was not a failure in the way Kern's victory was a failure. Forgent kept the roughly $90 million it had already collected before the patent collapsed. By some accounts, the total ran even higher. The companies that paid early did not get refunds. The ones that fought and won simply stopped paying. The patent was the same patent the whole time. The only thing that changed was who blinked first. So the lesson here is the inverse of the lone inventors. Robert Kearns was right and it cost him everything. Forgent was, by the Patent Office's own re-examination, largely wrong, and it still left the table tens of millions of dollars ahead. The patent expired on schedule. The standard stayed free. And the only people who paid were the ones who paid early. This is the troll's economics, and it is why this file matters. A patent does not have to be strong to be worth money. It only has to be expensive to fight. Forgent took a patent written for 1980s video hardware, pointed it at the most common image format on the planet, and turned the mere cost of litigation into $90 million before a court ever ruled on the merits. The patent did not have to win. It only had to last long enough and frighten enough people to fill the account before it expired. The standard everyone shared was, for 4 years, treated as something one company could privately own. It couldn't. But the question of who pays before the courts decide, that one never fully went away. Next time a patent on a one-click button, and the online store that tried to own the simplest act on the internet